We were told that in the history of them doing penetration testing, which I believe was like 7-8 years in the lead up to, they said no one was successful. I broke that. I was the first one to get in. And when I called him that day, I gave him that call around 2-3 p.m. Done what I needed to do. Site's been breached.
I've got a meeting with a few of the IT guys. Like, I'm running super late. I just spoke with the guy. I'm not sure if he's available right now, but they're expecting me already. Is it just through there? Yeah.
I never knew penetration testing existed throughout my youth. Some would say I'm still in my youth, but I'd agree otherwise. I'd say otherwise, sorry. Pretty much I was big into gaming, and a lot of my hacking experience would be around mobile games or just any video games that I get my hands on, like Icy Tower, for instance. And then when mobile came out, I know Subway Surfers, Temple Run, those some of the games. I think my biggest success was Injustice Gods Among Us. Like, I was able to get, what I wanted in terms of cosmetics or power-ups or, currency in the game and working online without being banned.
So you're a genius, huh?
I was a gifted child.
But at the same time, I was following either YouTube videos, and then once I learned from YouTube videos, I was just applying that to like other games and like understanding, what, this game engine does as opposed to this one. I would download a game and stop playing it if either the hacks didn't work or I'd hack it enough and I'd move on to the next game. So that's pretty much where it all started. After doing a combined law degree with IT, majoring in networking and cybersecurity, chose the path of cybersecurity. After my second year, I had an internship at another cybersecurity company and pretty much learned the ropes from there. So once I actually started with that company, I found out about penetration testing or ethical hacking. And anyone that has an idea about, like, if you say you work in cybersecurity, it's like, you hack into stuff. It's like, you could be a GRC consultant, which you work with risk and compliance and all that stuff. And, they're a hacker in at least the lens of friends, family, that sort of thing. So when you say you're an ethical hacker, you can only imagine what comes to mind. And physical penetration testing is something that you see from those Hollywood movies as well. I guess for physical penetration testing, it's a real world life. Like, so we simulate a real world scenario where we're able to compromise or test out or do an assessment of someone's or an organization's physical security. So this includes breaching into their premise, testing locks, testing employee awareness, social engineering your way through to, let's say, retrieve personally identifiable information. It's pretty much we get to break into actual buildings as someone malicious, and obviously we're given consent to do so. Very first physical penetration test. So I think we did 2 back-to-back. One of them was all the way down near area, and the other one was actually. So I stayed there for a couple of days. So the first one that I ever did, I actually did this with me and my other colleague. Describing the actual place without giving too much detail is that they had a warehouse floor, a factory floor kind of open setting. And then they had their kind of staff corporate area on the other side. It's under the same roof. It's just there's obviously doors in place to kind of get to both. So for the factory floor, there was lab workers and they all wore lab coats. And pretty much based off your access card that you had hanging around your neck on a lanyard, it was color coded. So if it was, let's say for instance, you could only walk the border of the actual factory floor. If you had one, it's all access. So you can walk anywhere you want. Obviously guests are limited to a certain color. They need to be also supervised as well. They can't be left without, being acknowledged or supervised or whatever. And then in the actual staff area, it's just people wearing, your button-ups, your suit pants, that kind of stuff. Just work attire. It was all under the same roof as well. So pretty much we drove around to the back or drove around the site to be able to investigate entry doors as well. We quickly tested it, waited around for about 5 minutes to see if anyone comes through that we can just tailgate. So that's the very first thing that we try, obviously trying to break into the premise. So I was dressed up in a suit. So my role or my disguise was to be an auditor. This is something that I like overusing, but it works so well. So what I do is I get a clipboard. I then create a checklist. So this checklist got from Google, customized it just a little bit to tailor to the actual company, created a fake company of my own, auditing company, put a little logo that I generated on the top right, on the top left, would put the company's logo, And then I'd get them to send me some documents beforehand and copy that template and put it on the footer as well. So pretty much tried to make it an actual company issued document. And then from then on, in big bold writing, I put external IT compliance audit. So if you're 5-10 meters away, you can see, and if I flash the actual document, you can see it's an external IT compliance audit. That's what everyone's going to read. Yeah. And the actual setting of the paper is a checklist. So it just looks like boxes you check plus some information. I purposely put the font to 6 or 8, and the actual text was lorem ipsum. So for those that aren't aware, lorem ipsum is a pretty much just Latin gibberish. You know, if you're doing web dev or if you see sample sites, you'll see a lot of lorem ipsum in text boxes. They're just placeholders. They don't really do anything, but just to use that as evidence afterwards, you know, of a successful pen test. If they, let's say, were conflicted or, you know, don't agree that it was successful, or like, look at the document that I had to manipulate employees, that sort of thing. So I had that document with me, or I had that clipboard with me. So I was just able to walk in. Because we completed a site reconnaissance about 6 months before, or a couple of months before, I generally knew the layout. So execution day, I walked through the front door as soon as it was opened. So I tailgated an individual. He left the door open. He went for a smoko. I put my hand through the door. I had my access pass on. Walked into a meeting room. The network port on my left side was patched into the network. Plugged it into the laptop and was able to do port scans, view local resources. Obviously, I was not restricted with time there, so I could stay there for as long as I want. I stayed up to an hour, completing my scans, taking my screenshots, was sitting back in the chair to actually, you know, establish that persistence or milk it just a little bit longer. I was given direct access to pretty much everything on their network. That was my end. We had someone else. So while that was happening, at the same time, my other colleague went over to the factory floor area. And before you get to the actual big gate, where you need to be able to tap your cards. The access cards that we created are just paper. The other ones are actual cards that are, you know, wired to or programmed to tap the door and open the door and whatever. So we were told when we were doing reconnaissance is that these guys are not meant to leave the door open for anyone. They're meant to open the door, look behind them, and close the door, or watch it close. That's at least what they were told. That's in all of their kind of documents and compliance procedures and whatever it might be. That's what we were able to exploit. They did not follow that protocol. These guys are government, they've got Defense Force clearance, by the way. So this is where it became more fun. So now we're in, all right? Now it's the physical persistence. How do we stay there for as long as we want? Can we walk in and out freely? So I was looking around, pretty much dropping rubber ducky USBs. So these are weaponized USBs that actually, they look like innocent USBs, but they're really not. There's a malicious script that's running to steal passwords, to track their IP address once they plug it in. So we know timestamps, who's plugged it in, which user, and they get a nice little flag, a web application or a website displayed saying that you plugged in a malicious USB, you failed the test, do not unplug the USB, you know, your IT manager will be coming down to speak to you shortly. So actually we got a hit on that and an intern plugged that in. So he probably had a really, really bad day, but I was able to leave after being there for about 3-4 hours, getting what I needed access to, recording evidences. I was able to freely walk in and out. So that's the engagement wrapped up. Physical penetration, like penetration testing or anything cybersecurity related, is like you're behind the screen. You know, like nowadays they're more accommodating for work from home kind of thing. But physical penetration testing, the reason why it's very, very daunting is because you're no longer behind a computer screen. You know, you're there in the flesh, talking to people, manipulating people, getting potentially criminalizing yourself. Because hey, what if you social engineer this person, you've lied to this person, and they've given you the keys to the kingdom, you know, and what are the repercussions behind that? So it's pretty daunting. I got to do it in the flesh, but that's like some people that they want to stay away from it. But I promise you, physical penetration testing, if you have a successful one, or at least some of the guys, like I've trained them up to be able to do physical, they've never done physical penetration testing before, but obviously putting together that holistic kind of end-to-end project, what it looks like, things to look out for, what's your methodology looking like, what are your prompts that you're going to be saying, what are your prompts that you're going to be sticking with, what artifacts you're going to be carrying with you. It's got to be well put together, but once you execute it and it's a good job and you're successful, it's the best feeling in the world. I guess, so the first time I did physical penetration testing, I would label myself as a bit introverted, or at least where I started Gridware, or at least started my career. I didn't really like I'd put on all smiles when I'm there at the site doing whatever, or speaking to a client. But really, the first time I ever did physical penetration testing, that was the most nerve-wracking moment ever. You know, walking around and, you know, like, okay, these are the guys that are going to see me and I'm going to have to deal with. Yeah, if you're introverted, definitely it's not fun. I was thrown personally in the deep end. But then again, once you're in the deep end, you're kind of fighting for your life, right? You know, you're keeping calm under the surface, but you're kicking like hell. The same thing applies to like anything cybersecurity, right? So like if it's penetration testing, it's a bit difficult, or, you know, you want to be able to improve. Being thrown in the deep end, having that opportunity is kind of where you improve. Yeah, improve and learn. That's what it comes down to. It's like you're never ever going to be able to do a physical penetration test, let alone a penetration test, if you're not actually stuck in the work, you know, dealing with a problem that's limited to you. You've got your resources, but how are you going to solve that problem? Same thing applies for physicals. Like, you just got to be stuck into it. You got to plan it out, obviously prepare. There's a lot of preparation that goes into physical pen testing. So like the testing could be 1 to 2 days to 2 weeks, but we've got to plan a month beforehand to even get a working proof of concept. This one, so this was my second physical penetration test, and I'd say it's the scariest one. At the same time, I felt like it was, looking back, it's an eye-opener. It was fun. It's fun, and no denying that, but definitely an eye-opener, because I feel like people, you know, don't really consider the security or at least the physical security controls of aged care centers. This particular penetration test, obviously leaving out client details and anything else like that, but was given the same love as a normal physical penetration test. So it was targeted, it was location further away from where I was. So site reconnaissance was left to the execution day before at midnight. So I was just there in the car park doing what I needed to do. We were told that in the history of them doing penetration testing, which I believe was like 7-8 years in the lead up to, so they do biannual penetration testing. So they do the same gig over and over, and they said no one was successful for their physical penetration test. But I broke that. I was the first one to get in, and when I called him that day, I believe I told him, you know, we're going to be ending around 4 p.m, 5 p.m, or end of day, close of business. I gave him that call around 2-3 p.m. Done what I needed to do. Site's been breached. He did not believe me. So that was a pretty cool feeling. They were a bit sneaky. They included they left a honeypot into the actual network, and they said to our sales guys, like, oh, we're going to leave something intentionally vulnerable in the network. We're not going to tell your pen testers. We want to see if they call it out, because at the same time, no clients before that ever called that out. So I was the first one to also identify that they had a honeypot in their network as well. So that was a pretty cool fact as well. Honeypot's an intentionally vulnerable instance in someone's network to pretty much lure out attackers to, you know, I guess understand what they're doing, or distract them in a sense where you could see what they're doing on this instance that you have full control of, and you're able to monitor their attacks and heuristics and behavior, so that way you can see what things they're looking out for and patch that yourselves. And also it's just to distract them. It's to create that vulnerable instance where it doesn't really, it's in your network, but at the same time it's isolated, where they're not really doing any damage. It's just you're distracting them in a sense. Pretty much once they're in there, it's like, oh, whatever they have or whatever they think they've exploited, it's really useless. Anyways, so same disguise as I had previously. So with my gray suit, auditing suit, I had a clipboard, I had a checklist with the lorem ipsum, external IT compliance audit. I had their letterhead issued beforehand, and I just pasted it onto our template. So I walked in, no expectation of actually being successful in this physical penetration test, but walked in, the receptionist, I told them, hey, I'm from head office. I'm here to conduct an external IT compliance audit. The reason for this audit, it's ad hoc. We're just here to observe that all IT operations are as per, you know, what's been authorized, just something along those lines. There was a lot of fluff, obviously, you could tell. That's a lot of the physical penetration. You got to think on your feet. That surprisingly worked. And what she then gave me is that I told her that I needed to be able to walk through the premise, you know, just by myself, recording stuff. You know, I'm from this third party doing this audit, but again, it was approved by head office. She didn't call anyone. She didn't fact check me. She provided me the PIN for all of the buildings, all of the locked doors where residents are kept, and the elevator codes as well, and an annotated map of where I need to go to and what's there, where's everything. She obviously labeled where the IT infrastructure is. That's not what I was there for. I mean, it's a bonus, but that's not what I was there for. She gave me all of that, and I was pretty much left alone to do what I wanted. So there was no tailgating involved. I was just given the keys to the kingdom just by asking.
Some people want to be too helpful.
That's the thing. So a lot of the, like, understanding human interactions is very, very important. So like if someone's a receptionist, right, they're just trying to get through day by day. You know, if you bombard them or overwhelm them with too much information, then they're just trying to get through. They don't want to get anyone in trouble. They just abide, right? So I recognize that. And given that it's a relatively safer neighborhood, or you know there hasn't been any history of that, I utilize that to my advantage. I asked and she gave. Yeah, once I was given everything that I needed, there was a sign in. I said I'm not going to sign myself in. I told her that. She was okay with that. All guests are meant to sign in, even if you're visiting your parent, whoever you are. If you're from head office, even if you're CEO, you're meant to be signing in. I didn't sign in. And I was able to freely traverse the entire premise. There was three, 4 levels. There was a patched in network port in the reception or the waiting area. I was able to do my port scans, sat there for about an hour and a half, got what I needed to, screenshotted a proof of concept, logged on to an unauthenticated SMB share, and that was the proof of concept for that one. So network access was achieved. It was very, very humble after that point. Yeah, just from the receptionist. So I was able to get Wi-Fi passwords. I was able to get personally identifiable information. I plugged in my rubber ducky USBs, got every flag that I needed to do, every objective that he potentially wanted, or to test how fail-proof their network is or infrastructure is. I was able to breach all of that. I observed unlocked workstations. There was sticky notes with passwords in plain text. That was reused for internal Active Directory credentials, which we confirmed later in an internal network test. There was a lot of that, but I guess what I was hinting to beforehand was where it was an eye-opener. I'm not more of an eye-opener, it's just more so something that obviously if I want to keep myself safe and aware of that these things could happen, was when I was on the 3rd floor, was completing the test for the first building. There was an elderly patient there. He was in the recreational or the living space area. I'm not sure. Just like it was a sofa, TV. He was just watching some TV. He yelled out to me. He said, "Excuse me, are you a doctor? I need some help. I need something to be looked at." Obviously, I was there unauthorized. I wasn't meant to be there. But he thought I was the doctor because I dressed the part. If that was my dad, and someone could have taken advantage. Maybe, I'm not sure, give him some bad advice. Whatever it might be. I was just there. I wasn't meant to be there. There was no trace of me being there. And who's monitoring that? Because for all the time that I was there, no one came up to me and said, "Hey, mate, what are you doing here?" I wasn't questioned once. So I was able to do whatever I wanted. There was only one ever penetration test where employees actually stood up to me and called me out for being suspicious.
He's conducting an audit. Very, very tired walking along the lengths of the building as well. So, you mind if I just come through this way? I've got to scan a couple of things. I'm here to do an ad hoc audit. A few of the guys already kind of let me in.
They always say this to us: never let anybody in.
To
get through reception.
I completely understand.
The only reason why is because they can say.
When I'm coming up with my sob story, I said, "Hey, I forgot my keys," or "I'm a new intern here." They follow up with, it's pretty much MFA in a sense, where they're asking me, "Who's your manager?" Sorry, and I'm there. I've got no idea. I'm just making names up at that point. But he said, "Look, go back to reception. They'll be able to sort you out." Like, yes, sorry, I just wasn't bothered walking all the way around, but appreciate advice. Thanks for talking to me or whatever. There's only been one time where they've been able to call me out. Other times, I guess equipping your staff or people that work in an organization to see, hey, if you're seeing something blatantly wrong, or if you're seeing someone's standing out, or someone's tailgated their way in, because times where I've tailgated, people have seen me. There's no doubt about that. There's quite a lot of foot traffic on some of the days we did penetration testing, and if you see something you're not meant to see, you're seeing someone do something they're not meant to, call it out. At the end of the day, regardless, even if you get it wrong, you'd rather be safe, because ultimately, if it's not a simulation, if it's an actual real person, it's a real life scenario, you want to be able to report that. There's nothing, I guess, you want to worry about your safety, you want to worry about security, call it out. If you see something you're not meant to, call it out. That's one thing that we generally apply as a recommendation, that, improve security awareness or just staff training on that sense, where if they observe anything that's malicious, you have to report it. Because a lot of the times people aren't really focused on things around them, especially when they're working, especially, they're just there to work, they don't want to, piss other people off, all of that stuff. They don't like doing that toe stepping. I guess that's just something generally we need to improve on, because ultimately we need to recognize that the human is the weakest link in cybersecurity, right? So you can spend, millions on security, have whatever it is, but ultimately if an employee clicks on a phishing link, it's game over. It all starts from there. Something else that needs to be recognized is that physical security, like again, you can invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions, into your security. About, you can have your firewalls in place, you can have, everything. If you have proprietary software, you can protect that. But that can all be compromised if your physical security is not in place, because what's stopping for someone from walking in, visiting an unlocked workstation and downloading the files they need to, So if your physical security is not up to par, then it's pretty much everything else is redundant. It's useless, exactly.